There was a tougher side of life in the 1970s, alongside the disco dancing and bell-bottoms. Economic struggles and rising inflation forced many families to scramble meal to meal. If you grew up with fried Spam or those hard, dry bread heels, you really are a true survivor of the 70s. So, when money was tight, what did poor families eat? Let's return to the dining tables of the past and discover 25 foods that only those who lived through hard times can truly understand. Spam. This pink rectangular block of meat was the most accurate economic indicator in every family's kitchen cabinet back then. If it appeared on a plate, it was a silent announcement that the family budget was extremely tight and fresh beef or chicken had become luxuries out of reach. Spam was once the main protein source feeding soldiers during World War II in the 1930s before becoming a lifesaver for housewives. In the 1970s, Spam was the cheapest food, had an almost permanent shelf life, and was highly versatile since it could be turned into a casserole or fried rice in an instant. In the memories of rural kids, Spam brought no shame. They loved its salty taste when fried crispy and eaten with eggs in the morning or tucked into white bread for lunch. However, taking a Spam sandwich to school sometimes earned them judgmental looks from friends. It's quite miraculous that today, this canned meat, once considered a symbol of poverty, is having a strong renaissance. Trendy chefs at high-end restaurants have turned it into a fashionable dish with a price tag that isn't cheap at all. A can of Spam now costs about $7, a price that someone on a fixed income would have to think twice about before taking it off the supermarket shelf. Powdered milk. Our breakfast fate in the 70s was often decided by a dull gray box issued by the government. When inflation spun out of control and the price of fresh milk soared, powdered milk became the only choice for millions of Americans receiving food assistance. The memory of it is always tied to that unmistakable chalky texture and a strange aftertaste that just clung to your throat. No matter how much we tried to stir, it never completely dissolved. There were always those suspicious little clumps floating on the surface like a reminder of lack. To hide this unpleasant taste, some moms would mix the milk with hot water the night before and leave it in the fridge to get ice cold, or sneakily mix it with a little real milk to fool the kids' taste buds. It was perfect for households that couldn't afford to waste even a single drop of food. While it no longer carries the heavy stigma it once did, for those who lived through that time, every sip of this bland liquid brings back images of sad mornings at the dinner table. Nowadays, this type of milk mostly appears in baking recipes, but for our generation, it remains a legacy of the hard times gone by. Bread heels. Life in the 1970s wasn't about indulgence. It was a battle of making do and getting the most out of every available resource. While people today often throw away the bread heels because they are dry and hard, back then, those heels were also utilized to create a meal. People would spread a very thick layer of butter on them to soften them up, or use them as a replacement for burger buns in emergencies when the whole loaf had run out. It wasn't a preference, but a habit born from necessity. Rural kids back then also learned to be more patient, tough, and frugal. Who wants to eat dry, hard bread? It's just that they knew they didn't have the right to be picky about anything. Because of that, eating bread heels was once a silent sign of poverty, but also a testament to toughness. Those very small things forged a generation that knew how to use everything they had, overcoming difficulties not by complaining, but with resourcefulness and persistence. Do you have any memories of those bread heels? Hit hype if you got a similar story. Government cheese. That giant block of bright orange milk, wrapped in wax and kept in a plain cardboard box with no label, is an unforgettable legend of the 70s and 80s. During this period, America faced a serious milk surplus, and the government decided to process that extra amount into cheese to distribute to low-income families. If that block of cheese was present in your fridge, it was a public social tag showing the family was struggling. It was so dense it was hard to cut, but it had a strange ability to melt, creating the perfect topping for casseroles. Interestingly, many people still claim that no commercial cheese, even famous brands, can match its deliciousness when making mac and cheese or grilled sandwiches. Government cheese was actually a high-quality American cheese that middle-class families were even willing to pay $5 to buy back from those who were issued it. The legacy it left behind is not just that characteristic rich flavor, but also a testament to the resilience of families who made the best of what they had to survive. Generic cereal in white boxes. Breakfast for poor kids in the 70s usually started with a plain white box, printed only with simple black letters like corn flakes or sweetened puffed rice. There were no colorful mascots, no mystery prizes inside, and certainly none of the glamour of famous brands. This was a bitter but realistic lesson that those colorful cereal boxes were only for the rich kids down the street. We often had to drown these grains in lots of sugar just to make them taste more like food and less like soggy cardboard. It was an effort by parents to ensure their kids had enough energy to start a school day, even when their wallets were empty. While peers excitedly talked about the prize they found in a brand-name cereal box, we just quietly chewed our bland food. That very difference forced us to get used to reality early and become tougher. Looking back at those plain white boxes now, we realize they didn't just hold cereal, they held the thriftiness and effort of the whole family during a difficult time. Beans and rice. Why beans and rice? Simply because they were dirt cheap and could be bought in bulk for almost nothing. In a landscape of rising inflation and job instability, balancing every dollar became a mandatory survival skill for every working family. Grandmothers and mothers would often soak dried beans overnight, then simmer them in a large pot with a piece of fat back if they were lucky, creating a dinner that filled the bellies of a crowded household. The biggest advantage of this food was its long-term storage capability without needing a fridge, a real lifesaver when money was tight. Back then, beans and rice weren't trendy like the burritos or the shimmering social media posts of today. If someone asked what you were having for dinner and you said beans and rice, they knew times were hard. It was just a practical meal that helped us get through hunger during the lean days. Now, this dish has become a beloved classic, reminding us of a time when resilience was measured by the ability to turn the cheapest ingredients into a warm family meal. Beans and rice still always tell a bigger story about human strength in the face of economic shifts. Drinking water from the garden hose. Memories of 70s summers are incomplete without the image of the rubber hose lying quietly in the backyard. Life in the 70s revolved around making do and utilizing what nature and the family had available. That hose was our water station and our friends throughout the long, scorching summer. The water flowing out at first usually had a warm plastic smell, but after that, it would be ice-cold perfection with an aftertaste a bit like freshly cut grass. Kids would pass the hose around, drinking directly without anyone worrying about germs, lid levels, or any other hazards. If the water tasted a bit strange, we just considered it an extra flavor of outdoor life. Miraculously, we survived and became stronger, as if drinking from the hose helped build an iron immune system against all challenges. Looking back, poverty didn't beat us. It only made us tougher and more grateful for the smallest things. The image of a sunburnt, sweaty child by the garden hose remains a beautiful symbol of the freedom and adaptability of our generation. If these memories take you back to a nostalgic childhood, like and subscribe to help us share this journey even more. Cornbread and milk. Cornbread and milk in the 1970s wasn't a side dish or a common snack, but it served as a full main meal. This dish has deep roots in history, especially in the South and Appalachia, where flour was often expensive, but cornmeal was cheap and easy to find. For anyone growing up in poverty back then, the memory of this lifesaver dish remains intact. Just crumble the cornbread into a glass, then pour milk over it. It could be fresh milk, buttermilk, or even just diluted powdered milk. The result was a thick mixture that filled the belly even if the taste wasn't exactly exciting for kids. Sometimes, in moments of real desperation, if there wasn't even cornbread, saltine crackers would be used as a substitute, bringing the same struggle, but with a different texture. It's strange that today, this rustic dish appears on the menus of luxury restaurants as a nostalgic comfort food. However, for those who once had to eat it to survive, it will forever be a reminder of the days when the family had to stretch every little bit of food during the darkest economic periods. Canned vegetables. Back then, fresh vegetables weren't always available. Farmers markets were rare. There was no concept of clean eating, and definitely no long shelves full of organic greens like there are now. Most families could only buy what fit their budget, and for low-income homes, that was almost always canned goods. Green beans, peas, corn, or those hard-to-swallow mixed vegetable cans. Canned veggies were cheap and lasted a long time, helping a meal stretch for a few more days when money ran low. But they carried an uncomfortable label. Fresh veggies were linked to being well off, while canned goods were linked to trying to get by. Not to mention, they were mushy, salty, and bland, the kind of thing kids just pushed around on their plates, hoping the meal would end soon. The irony is that canned vegetables were once praised as a symbol of modernity. But by the 70s, convenience was no longer as important as image. Food began to reflect status. And a plate of canned green beans back then was enough for the whole neighborhood to understand how much your family was struggling, even if no one said it out loud. Sometimes just looking at a meal was enough to understand a whole story, evoking an entire era. McDonald's. Oh no, this is about something you wouldn't get to eat if you didn't have the means. McDonald's in the eyes of a poor child in the 70s was like a mythical unicorn, extremely rare and full of magic. For our family, pulling into the parking lot of the Golden Arches wasn't a daily habit, but a major event that only happened once a year. We usually only got to sit in the car, slow down, and stare longingly at the bright signs while Mom drove past. Unless it was someone's birthday or in an absolute emergency, we didn't actually get to step inside. Every portion of fries was meticulously divided among siblings like precious gems. Ketchup packets were distributed according to a strict quota, and even the paper bag was brought home to be reused for next time. If we were lucky enough to get a Happy Meal, it would be a legendary story told over and over for a whole week at school. That lack didn't make the kids sad. On the contrary, it increased the extreme joy every time there was a chance to enjoy fast food. The memory of driving past McDonald's is tied to learning how to wait and thinking of the whole family, which goes far beyond just a burger. What about you? What memories do you have with McDonald's? Ramen. Before it became a $15 high-end food craze with every bowl, ramen noodles were pure survival food in the truest sense. The struggling economy of the 1970s made instant noodles a staple for every struggling working-class person. If your kitchen cabinets were always stocked with ramen packets, it showed the family was living paycheck to paycheck. A small pack of noodles full of salt and the magic MSG seasoning packet was the lifesaver to fill a belly for just a few cents. At that time, we didn't worry about sodium content or health issues. The only goal was to stop the stomach from growling. Some kids even ate ramen for breakfast every day because it was cheaper than cereal and fresh milk. It's miraculous to see how ramen has transformed from a meal of poverty into a global culinary obsession with all sorts of fancy toppings like pork belly or soft-boiled eggs. For those who once had to rely on it in the 70s, the presence of ramen in high-end restaurants today feels very surprising and a bit nostalgic. Ramen is the symbol of convenience and the ability to provide maximum energy with minimum cost during the most dead-end times of life. Hot dogs. Hot dogs in the 1970s weren't trendy street food, but a clear sign that the family budget was seriously lacking. When the family had to eat hot dogs for dinner, it wasn't a choice of preference, but a necessity of economic circumstances. We were often served the cheapest kind of hot dogs, full of fillers and preserved in vacuum-sealed plastic bags with that strange juice. A pack of Franks cost almost nothing, and Mom often stretched them by using regular white bread instead of the more expensive specialized hot dog buns. Some nights, dinner was just Weiner water soup, where the meat flavor was just a faint aftertaste in the bowl of broth. While foodies today try to elevate the hot dog, for us, it remains forever tied to the memory of difficult Tuesday nights. It is a testament to the fact that parents tried to bring a warm meal to their children despite the surrounding poverty. Hot dogs have always been a part of American tradition, even in the hardest times. Bologna Sandwich. The Bologna Sandwich was the unofficial meal for those in a pinch during the 70s. The main reason it was popular was because it was extremely cheap and could be stored for a long time in the fridge without spoiling. Basically, it was seen as the less respected cousin of the hot dog, a minimum protein choice for families who were struggling. If a slice of fried bologna tucked between two slices of white bread appeared in your school lunchbox, all the friends around you understood that your family was balancing every dollar. The feeling of sitting at the kitchen table, staring at that sad sandwich while dreaming of a fast food meal at McDonald's is an unforgettable experience of a poor childhood. Sometimes we felt a bit discouraged seeing richer kids take out fancy, convenient lunchboxes while we only had a thin slice of meat spread with mustard. Nevertheless, bologna was still a favorite for many fathers, and its salty, savory flavor when fried crispy still has its own charm. Today, the Bologna Sandwich carries an ironic, nostalgic charm, reminding us of an era when resourcefulness in the kitchen was the key to survival. Fried bologna will always be part of the memory of thrifty but love-filled lunches from Mom. Grits and oatmeal. These two breakfast staples weren't just a menu choice for many families. They were an absolute necessity. A breakfast without bacon, without eggs, without fancy cereal, but only grits or oatmeal was the reality for millions of households. Rolled oats were cheap, nutritious, and extremely easy to prepare with just water and a pinch of sugar if the family could still afford that luxury. Grits made from ground corn were an irreplaceable staple in the South, while oatmeal dominated the tables in the North. They helped mothers fill the bellies of a large brood of children without spending too much, an effective strategy to stretch the grocery budget. The survival value of these two types of porridge lay in their sustainability and ability to provide long-lasting energy throughout a morning of school. There was a time when kids felt disgusted by these bland bowls of porridge, but now they have returned as timeless classic dishes. The legacy of grits and oatmeal is a reminder of the simple breakfasts that raised an entire generation. They represent perseverance and resilience, helping us understand that sometimes the simplest things are what nourish us best in a storm. Mac and cheese. Back in the 70s, boxed mac and cheese was the ultimate we're-broke dinner for every working family. For those facing inflation and economic recession, these cheap boxes of noodles were an indispensable lifesaver in the kitchen cabinet. The image of that neon orange cheese powder that looks radioactive now brings back happy nostalgia, but back then, it was a symbol of maximum cost-cutting. We often had to scrape the last bits of noodles clinging to the plate, very aware that wealthier families were enjoying steak or roast chicken. One box of noodles, a little margarine and water, or a bit of milk if lucky, was enough to create a quick meal for the whole family for less than $1. Since real cheese was too expensive, processed cheese products like Kraft or Velveeta became irreplaceable necessities. Sometimes, Mom would mix in a little Spam or peas to make the meal look more abundant. It's ironic that what was once considered a meal of desperation is now a symbol of comfort. High-end restaurants are elevating this mac and cheese with gourmet versions priced up to $15, a dizzying change from its original value. PB&J. Today, PB&J is loved as a nostalgic comfort food, but in the 70s, it was simply a sign that money was very tight. Peanut butter back then was often a government-distributed item for free to struggling families, so its presence in a lunchbox was a public display of social status. If your lunch only had PB&J and a cheap juice box, all the kids at school recognized your situation immediately. The cheapest jelly was usually kept in glass jars that, once used up, would be washed to serve as drinking glasses for the whole family. While we chewed our simple sandwich, kids from well-off families often enjoyed ham sandwiches, fruit cups, and trendy fast food items. However, government peanut butter was often rated as tastier and higher quality than many retail types, leaving a positive impression in many people's memories. Now, PB&J has had an ultimate rise with gourmet versions using organic nut butters and expensive artisanal jams. The legacy of PB&J is its enduring presence in American life, a dish that has nourished both body and soul through generations of hard times. Potatoes. In the 70s, potatoes weren't just food. They almost played the role of a social class symbol. For working families struggling through the oil crisis and inflation, potatoes became the main meal instead of just a side dish. If your dinner menu repeated potato dishes night after night, it meant the family couldn't afford even the smallest piece of steak. At a price of only about 10 cents a pound at the time, potatoes were nearly 10 times cheaper than beef. We often ate boiled, mashed, baked, or fried potatoes continuously to feed the whole family for many days with just one large sack. They provided plenty of energy and the ability to fill the stomach quickly, an essential need when the wallet was empty. The monotony of potato dishes sometimes made kids feel discouraged, but it was all parents could guarantee so that no one went to bed on an empty stomach. It's interesting that today, potatoes have returned proudly, with gourmet mashed potato versions or baked potatoes full of high-end toppings at luxury restaurants. For those who lived through those years, potatoes will always be a symbol of resilience and gratitude for the most basic things in life. Homemade soup. Quite different from the trendy and organic look of today, homemade soup in the 1970s was survival in liquid form. Back then, fast food and prepackaged meals were considered symbols of the future and wealth. If mom had to cook soup from scratch, it meant the family was in a tight spot and didn't have enough money to buy even the convenient prepackaged cans of soup. Soup was the way to stretch meals as far as possible by utilizing every scrap of leftover food. A pot of soup on the stove was usually a mixture of water, a few old chicken bones, a lonely potato, or half a carrot from last week. The presence of the soup pot was a sign that payday was still far off, and the family had to tighten their belts to the maximum. Its survival value was turning the minimal ingredients into a warm meal for the whole family, ensuring everyone had something to sip. There were times when dinner was simply potato soup made from one small chopped potato and a bit of diluted milk, but it was served like a special gift. Ironically, today we are willing to pay $12 for a bowl of soup that people in the 70s once considered a stew of desperation. Cabbage-based meals. Cabbage in the 1970s wasn't just a green vegetable, it was truly a financial survival strategy for every poor family. When inflation rose and wages didn't keep up with prices, cabbage became a lifesaver because it was one of the cheapest vegetables you could buy at the supermarket. The image of a house smelling strongly of cabbage simmering on the stove was the clearest sign of a squeezed grocery budget. Dishes like cabbage soup, boiled cabbage with potatoes, or fried cabbage with a few scraps of cheap meat became familiar survival menus. Cabbage helped fill the family's bellies thanks to its high fiber content and versatility in cooking, being able to be transformed into hundreds of different ways to fight monotony. Many kids back then had to participate in cabbage soup diets not because they wanted to lose weight, but because it was a necessity of real life. It's surprising that what was once a sign of financial struggle is now hailed as a superfood good for health and the gut. It reminds us of a time when health and fullness were maintained by the smartest and most thrifty choices. Tuna Casserole. Chung ta kong ko tien mua bitet, nung chung ta van se komot bua toi tinsoan. By the 70s, when the economy was in deep recession, tuna casserole became the ultimate food symbol of struggling families. If mom took out a Pyrex dish full of this mushy, slightly fishy-tasting creamy mixture, it was an affirmation of the hard times surrounding us. The familiar recipe included a cheap can of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, a bag of egg noodles, and maybe some crushed potato chips on top if the family felt they needed a bit of fake luxury. Although most kids back then didn't really like the mushy texture and its smell, tuna casserole still appeared regularly as a way to stretch the grocery budget. Its survival value lay in using entirely non-perishable ingredients, helping housewives always have a backup plan when the wallet was empty. It is a relic of a time when creativity in the kitchen was no longer a hobby, but a mandatory requirement to survive. Today, tuna casserole brings a mixed feeling of love and hate, but no one can deny its role as a lifesaver during the difficult years. Meatloaf. Meatloaf was already a budget meal, but when the inflation of the 1970s hit hard, it became a masterclass in culinary illusion. To stretch 1 pound of ground beef for a whole crowded household, mothers had to become more creative than ever by adding lots of fillers. Meatloaf dinners back then often had more breadcrumbs, oats, or crackers than actual meat. The result was a block of food that looked like a flavored starch brick, covered in an eye-catching tomato glaze to hide the truth about the actual protein deficiency. Sometimes mashed potatoes or even gelatin were mixed in just to make the meat block look bigger and heartier. For struggling families, meatloaf wasn't just food, but a survival tactic that helped maintain the feeling of a traditional hearty dinner. Although the flavor quality might be debated among siblings, no one could deny the parents' effort to ensure everyone had a portion. Today, meatloaf has become a classic comfort food, but for the 70s generation, it remains forever a sign of lack and the ability to stretch a grocery budget to the very limit. Sugar sandwiches or bread and butter. When the fridge was empty and the pantry wasn't any better, buttered bread sprinkled with sugar was the final savior of a 1970s childhood. The oil crisis and job instability made stretching the grocery budget a vital life skill. The sugar sandwich, or what was poignantly called the imaginary sandwich, was the ultimate sign that the family was completely out of money. It was simply 2 slices of white bread spread with a thin layer of margarine and sprinkled with some granulated sugar. For many kids, this was a rushed breakfast before school or a sad dinner when parents no longer had enough money to buy even the cheapest slice of bologna. Its survival value lay in providing quick calories and energy, helping kids not have to go to bed with a growling stomach. Despite the lack of nutrients, the sweetness of the sugar sometimes brought a small comfort in a harsh reality. Today, nostalgia might make some remember this dish fondly, but for many others, it is a painful reminder of the hardest times in life. Canned meat. Canned meat wasn't a new invention, but in the 70s, it rightfully became the king of the family grocery budget. When the price of fresh meat became too expensive due to inflation, canned food was the only choice that helped mothers ensure there was protein in the meal. Grandmothers and mothers often fried them to create a crispy crust, tucked them into cheap white bread, or mixed them with whatever scraps were left in the fridge to create a belly-filling dinner. Although TV commercials tried to dress up canned meat with a sense of luxury, the harsh reality was always present at the school lunch table. Taking out a slice of canned meat sometimes made us feel like the whole world was judging the family's social status. However, the survival value it brought was undeniable, helping millions of growing kids not have to go to bed on an empty stomach. It's interesting to see how culinary trends have turned around ironically. What was once food for the poor is now becoming a favored dish in high-end restaurants, where diners are willing to pay a large sum to enjoy an elevated nostalgic flavor. Reusing aluminum foil. In poor families in the 70s, throwing away a piece of aluminum foil after one use was practically seen as a serious sin. That era didn't have official recycling programs. Instead, there was old-fashioned thriftiness disguised as resourcefulness. A square piece of foil might have been used to wrap many generations of leftovers, even longer than the lifespan of the family dog. After each use, Mom would carefully flatten it out, smooth out the wrinkles, and fold it like a fine piece of origami before stuffing it into the drawer next to the old bread bags. If the foil was really clean, it would be reused to bake a new batch of cookies, stretching its life cycle to the maximum possible. The survival value of this action lay in saving every cent on kitchen supplies to save money for more essential food needs. The characteristic crackling sound of foil when being smoothed out is still an unforgettable auditory memory of a poor childhood. The 70s might be long gone, but this habit of thriftiness still lives on persistently in the minds of our generation. Dry out stale bread to make stuffing additives. In the old kitchens, there was no such thing as spoiled or stale bread, because it was always considered a resource. The mistake today is throwing away stale bread when it starts to harden or buying expensive prepackaged convenient stuffing mixes. Grandma considered wasting bread a sin. The simple tip that helped the poor save more was drying out stale bread to make stuffing or additives. This is a slow, steady step that makes large, hearty meals possible later without extra cost. Grandma took the old bread slices, cut them into small cubes. They were spread on trays to bake slowly at a low temperature until completely dry, removing all moisture. Then they were stored in airtight jars for long-term preservation. Dried bread was used to make stuffing for turkey, breadcrumbs for meatloaf, or filler for stews. Every crumb had a purpose, demonstrating diligence and appreciation for the smallest things. Grandma turned this small habit into an important pantry management skill. You should share this tip with family and friends. Buy a bunch of identical socks. Our grandma had a drawer full of identical socks. Initially, this might seem boring, but it was a simple and wonderful money-saving tip. We often own many different pairs of socks, making pairing time-consuming and forcing us to discard the whole pair when one is lost. Grandma's tip is that when all the socks are the same, you never have to pair them. If one is lost, the remaining one can still pair with any other clean sock. Grandma always bought a dozen or more of the same style, brand, color, and size. She chose durable material and classic colors like black, white, or gray. She always washed them inside out to preserve elasticity. This habit helped Grandma reduce waste, simplify laundry, and eliminate sorting. She said, "No effort, no stress." It is a simple arrangement that yields great results in time and money. Use vinegar for everything. White vinegar was the most versatile, budget-friendly item our grandma kept in the pantry. Our mistake is buying multiple expensive specialized cleaners, fabric softeners, and weed killers. Grandma's white vinegar could do it all. It is a multi-purpose cleaner, a laundry softener, and a natural weed killer. She often mixed vinegar and water in equal parts to create a natural cleaner. She used it to descale kettles, soften laundry, clean mirrors, or unclog drains. In the garden, Grandma used vinegar as a natural weed killer by spraying it directly. She believed vinegar helped cut grease, disinfect surfaces, and deodorize effectively. She said its strong smell quickly dissipates and leaves a fresh, neutral finish. It is a single ingredient that replaces many other products, a lesson in minimalism and cost efficiency. Make a big pot of Bolognese sauce and freeze for later use. Our grandma applied the batch cooking method. She called it the smart way to stretch the grocery budget. The mistake we often make is only cooking small portions, failing to take advantage of bulk discounts and wasting cooking time. Grandma always cooked a large pot of sauce and froze it for later use. This helped her save time by having prepared meals ready. She started by sautéing ground meat with onion, garlic, and herbs, then added canned tomatoes and milk, simmering into a rich sauce. For a thicker texture, Grandma often simmered the sauce uncovered for the last 30 minutes. After cooling completely, she transferred the sauce into freezer-safe containers or bags and carefully labeled them. This sauce freezes very well and can be used later in spaghetti, lasagna, baked potatoes, or stuffed peppers. Grandma often bought meat and canned goods in bulk, cutting costs even further. Freeze leftovers in coffee cans. Before Ziploc bags or specialized containers were common, storing leftovers was a big challenge, and Grandma always looked for ways to avoid waste. The common mistake is wasting food because of a lack of specialized containers or taking up too much space in a small freezer. Our grandma was creative by reusing old coffee cans to make temporary freezer containers. Old coffee cans, after being scrubbed clean, became a space-saving and cost-effective solution. Soup, stew, spaghetti sauce, or casserole were poured full into the cans by Grandma. When the food was completely frozen, it could be slid out of the can into a neat cylinder. This cylinder shape allowed Grandma to stack them, saving precious space in the old, small freezer. This tip is practical, inexpensive, and a prime example of recycling and the non-waste mentality of Grandma's generation. Use leftover oatmeal to make meatloaf. Don't throw away that cooked and cooled bowl of oatmeal after breakfast. Grandma never did. To her, that was the secret to making meatloaf soft, delicious, and enough to serve a large crowd. Grandma saw leftover oatmeal as the secret to extending the meat quantity and ensuring the meatloaf never dried out. For every pound of ground meat, she would gently mix in 1 cup of cooked and completely cooled oatmeal. She carefully reminded that the oatmeal must be cooled to avoid spoiling the texture. This wasn't just a way to extend the meal, it was how she shared love and warmth with the dinner table without extra cost. Oatmeal is a miraculous ingredient. It absorbs seasonings very well. Grandma often seasoned the oatmeal beforehand with a little garlic powder, paprika, or herbs before mixing, allowing the flavor to soak deeper, creating a wonderful harmony. This tip from Grandma was especially valuable when the family needed to host a large crowd. It was the easy solution to save money while extending the meal and still keeping it delicious and filling. This trick also worked well when Grandma made hamburgers, meatballs, or stuffed peppers. Make bone broth from chicken feet or necks. Instead of using expensive store-bought canned broth, Grandma always made her own bone broth, and the secret ingredients were things others usually threw away: chicken feet and necks. She explained that chicken feet and necks are forgotten treasures because they are rich in collagen and minerals. It's a shame people consider them waste products. Grandma always washed the feet and necks thoroughly, then briefly blanched them for a few minutes to remove impurities. After that, everything was transferred to a large pot along with rustic herbs like onion, carrots, garlic, and a few bay leaves. She filled the pot with water and added a little apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is the key. It helps pull all the nutrients out of the bones. The pot simmered on low heat, sometimes lasting 12 to 24 hours. The aroma from the broth pot spread throughout the house, bringing a warm and complete feeling. Grandma's bone broth had a thick, smooth, jelly-like texture, which was ideal for making soups and stews. It wasn't just about saving money, it was about making the most of what nature provided, creating a cheap, nutritious broth that surpassed any canned product. Make vinegar from fruit scraps. In Grandma's kitchen, fruit scraps never belonged in the trash. Our mistake is throwing away apple peels, cores, or any other clean fruit scraps, considering them worthless organic waste. Grandma turned them into a homemade vinegar that was inexpensive and useful for more purposes than anything bought at the store. The secret is collecting fruit scraps to make your own vinegar, a versatile ingredient useful for cleaning, pickling, or making sauces. She only used fresh, mold-free scraps and always avoided citrus fruits so as not to spoil the fermentation process. The fruit scraps were placed in a clean glass jar filled with water, and 1 tablespoon of sugar was added for each cup of water to nourish the natural fermentation process. She tied cheesecloth tightly over the mouth of the jar so air could still enter to feed the bacteria, and kept it in a warm, dark place where the slow transformation occurred, the step requiring patience with stirring daily during the first week. After about 2 weeks, Grandma strained out the solids and let the liquid ferment for another 3 to 4 weeks until it had a strong sour smell. This homemade vinegar was extremely useful, saving the cost of buying commercial vinegar, and if she wanted stronger vinegar, Grandma just let it ferment longer, achieving independence in ingredients. Save and use potato peels. We often don't think twice when throwing potato peels in the trash, but if you did that in the old kitchens, you would be considered wasteful. Potato peels, for Grandma, were not waste, but a free ingredient with the ability to create wonderful flavor. Her secret was that potato peels are a free ingredient that can be processed into a filling snack or used to simmer broth. The potato peels were scrubbed clean to remove dirt, then cut into thin strips. They were mixed with leftover fat or cooking oil, often rendered bacon grease, a classic flavored fat. Then they were put in the oven or fried in a pan until crispy. The rich flavor of the fat blended with the caramelized starch created a snack that was both filling and economical, a treat that cost almost nothing extra. Moreover, potato peels also went straight into the stock pot. Boiling the peels long enough created a rustic potato broth. This broth added depth and starch to soups and sauces, a critical survival skill, especially when meat was scarce and there were no bones to simmer. This is the kind of quiet wisdom that large food companies would prefer you not rediscover. Are these tips surprising you? Tap hype and keep watching for even more amazing tips coming up. Revive wilted vegetables with ice-cold water. Any vegetable that looks sad or lifeless was given a second chance by Grandma. She used this simple trick to save countless vegetables from the trash. Use a bowl of ice-cold water. You just need to soak the wilted vegetables in cold water for about 10 to 20 minutes. The ice-cold water creates a thermal shock, causing the vegetable fibers to absorb enough necessary moisture to stiffen, restoring their inherent crispness. This tip doesn't require any modern tools, just an understanding of how food works. This turns what looks like trash into crisp salad, or at least the perfect base ingredient for soup and sandwich fillings, avoiding food waste. More importantly, grocery chains secretly benefit from us not knowing this trick. They want us to throw away items bought a few days ago and come back to buy fresher ones. Use potato water or pasta water to feed plants or thicken soups. Every time we cook pasta or potatoes, we usually pour that cloudy, precious water straight down the drain without realizing its value. Our mistake is wasting this natural starch and mineral content. The secret is reusing unsalted boiling water to water plants, or used to thicken soups or stews. To use it safely, the prerequisite condition is that the water must be completely cool, and absolutely no salt should be added during boiling, as salt will harm the plants. After cooling, the water is poured around the garden plants or house plants, as the starch helps nourish beneficial soil bacteria, providing free nutrients. If used in cooking, Grandma taught to slowly whisk this starchy water into the simmering liquid to prevent lumps and create a smooth, natural thickness for sauces. That is a great way to reduce waste and double the value of the ingredients already used. This water adds depth and starch to dishes, reducing the need for other thickeners, demonstrating the ingenuity and thorough resource management of the old generation. Transform leftovers into new dishes. If you notice the mysterious dishes in Grandma's kitchen, the ones that are both familiar and strange, chances are they are cleverly hiding leftovers. Anyone would get bored if yesterday's meal appeared on the table, or worse, throwing away small scraps, wasting the effort put in. Grandma taught the creative art of food recycling, transform leftovers into new dishes. The smallest scraps, like leftover roast meat, steamed vegetables, mashed potatoes, were chopped up, re-seasoned, and mixed into meat pies, savory fritters, or savory pancakes. This method not only extends the food, but also gives the feeling that you are eating something completely fresh. Grandma transformed the smallest scraps into fresh and delicious new dishes, avoiding the feeling of serving old leftovers. This is a quiet declaration by the homemaker that the kitchen is still running well and dinner is still continuing. These tips were born out of necessity, but they carry a quiet pride in resourcefulness and not wasting resources, a precious legacy. Grow garlic from leftover cloves that sprout. We often think sprouted garlic cloves are spoiled or worthless and throw them away. This waste is not only food waste, but also forces us to buy expensive seeds if we want to garden. But Grandma taught that a single sprouted garlic clove can grow into an entirely new garlic bulb, turning waste into a supply source. The simple tip that helped the poor save more was planting sprouted garlic cloves into a new garlic bulb. This is a simple gardening method that avoids buying seeds and prevents food waste. Grandma separated the clove and planted it with the pointed end facing up, about 2 inches deep in well-drained soil. Garlic loves full sun and develops slowly. Over time, it not only produces fresh garlic bulbs, but also tender green shoots, delicious to add to salads or stir-fries. This simple method not only gives the family a stable supply of garlic, but is also a great example of natural recycling. This demonstrates amazing resourcefulness, turning something seemingly worthless into an abundant supply source, contributing to family self-sufficiency. Keep a soup pot for vegetable scraps. Grandma always kept a dedicated stock pot or a frozen bag containing clean vegetable scraps. Vegetable scraps like onion peels, celery tops, carrot peels, and herb stems are often thrown away without us realizing their nutritional value. Grandma considered this serious waste, as they are the liquid gold of the kitchen and the foundation of every delicious dish. The simple tip that helped the poor save more was collecting clean vegetable scraps to simmer into homemade broth, which is both nutritious and completely free. Grandma saved onion peels, carrot peels, herb stems, and mushroom pieces, but always carefully avoided adding bitter scraps like broccoli stems so as not to spoil the broth's flavor. When the pot or bag was full, she simmered them with clean water, adding bay leaves and peppercorns for an hour or more to extract maximum flavor. The broth was then strained, cooled, and preserved. This broth had a rich flavor, was nutritious, and completely free. This habit built a stable reserve of broth for soups, stews, and sauces. This is amazing resourcefulness and a testament to the philosophy of not wasting, where everything can be reborn and has value. Make mock dishes during rationing. During periods of rationing and scarcity, the biggest challenge wasn't just physical hunger, but how to keep the family from feeling deprived or losing spiritual dignity. Mock dishes were one of the most creative tips ever invented, born out of necessity and the resilience of the homemaker. The mistake others make is letting the family feel hopeless or endure inadequate meals. Grandma revealed the secret that helps the poor save more and maintain dignity, prepare recipes that look and taste like the real thing without using any expensive ingredients. A classic example is mock apple pie, where resourcefulness was pushed to the extreme. Instead of scarce real apples, Grandma used crushed Ritz crackers, sugar, cinnamon, and lemon juice to mimic the flavor and texture of apples. The goal was to fool even the most refined palates. More important than the taste, it was a quiet, proud declaration that dinner was still happening, still hearty and complete. Mock dishes brought a sense of normalcy, warmth, and dignity to the family during hard times, helping to overcome scarcity. This cleverness is resourcefulness straight from a family cook. Shirt collars inside out. When the edge of a shirt collar starts to fray, it's a sign of wear and tear that modern people might consider a reason to throw it away. But our grandma said, "Don't throw it away, turn it inside out." Our mistake is throwing away shirts when the collar, the most worn part, begins to fray. Grandma's tip was to turn the collar inside out, making the unworn underside the new face. This helps significantly extend the shirt's lifespan. Grandma carefully took out the stitching along the collar band using a seam ripper. She flipped the collar out and reattached it using a simple back stitch or a sewing machine. She prioritized choosing matching thread and thoroughly ironing the collar before reattaching it. This classic sewing tip breathed new life into shirts and sweatshirts. Especially for work clothes, it saved Grandma money on replacements. It demonstrates meticulous care and respect for clothing. Ferment leftover vegetables to make pickles or kraut. Our grandma always looked for ways to preserve fresh vegetables longer, and she said, "Don't waste wilted vegetables, ferment them." The mistake we often make is throwing away leftover or slightly wilted vegetables, thinking they are about to spoil. Our grandma taught that fermenting leftover vegetables with brine can create homemade pickles or sauerkraut. They can last for months and are virtually cost-free. Grandma shredded leftover cabbage, carrots, radishes, or onions and packed them tightly into a clean glass jar. She dissolved 1 teaspoon of salt in 2 cups of non-chlorinated water and poured it over the vegetables until submerged. She pressed them down and loosely capped the jar. After about 5 to 7 days at room temperature, the pickles were ready. Homemade pickles not only add flavor, but also contain probiotics good for the gut. Grandma also reused the brine for a second fermentation batch or as a base for sour salad dressings. Soak beans overnight on the wood stove. Dried beans are cheap, filling, and store well, but they cook better when soaked. The mistake we often make is cooking beans without soaking them first, or soaking them traditionally, which prolongs cooking time and wastes fuel. Our grandma used the residual heat from the wood stove to soak beans overnight. This method significantly shortened the cooking time, conserved fuel, and provided a better texture for the beans. If using a wood stove, Grandma placed a pot of beans and water near the edge of the stove before bed. She left them to soak overnight with the remaining warmth. The next morning, she moved the pot to the hot center of the stove and simmered until soft. This is a method that requires no electricity. It conserves fuel, saves money, and gives the beans a better texture. It is a clever combination of resourcefulness and leveraging thermal energy. Turn broken umbrellas into top patches. Our grandma believed nothing should be thrown away, even a broken umbrella. Our mistake is throwing away broken umbrellas and having to buy new materials for patching. Grandma reused the waterproof fabric from the umbrella canopy. This fabric is often durable nylon or polyester. She used it to patch tarps, raincoats, or backpacks. She carefully removed the fabric from the spokes and cut it into squares or strips. She could use fabric glue or waterproof tape to attach the patches or sew them with weather-resistant thread. She always kept a few pre-cut patches in the toolbox for emergencies. This tip saved Grandma money on replacement materials. It is a lesson in ingenuity and reducing waste by reusing what is already available. Catch gray water from dishwashing to water garden plants. Hand dishwashing creates gray water, which is used water that is not heavily contaminated, and Grandma knew it could benefit the garden. The mistake we often make is flushing dishwashing water straight down the drain, wasting water, and increasing utility bills. Our Grandma caught the hand dishwashing water. She instructed to use unscented biodegradable soap to ensure safety for the plants. This helped her reduce water waste and utility bills. She placed a plastic tub or dish basin in the sink to catch the water. Then she poured the water around outdoor plants or house plants. She always poured near the base, avoiding watering directly onto edible leaves. She only temporarily stored the water in the shade and used it within 24 hours. This method reduces both water waste and utility bills. Grandma said that making small adjustments like this accumulates over time, helping both the garden and the wallet thrive. Use bar soap ends in a sock. Leftover bar soap scraps too small to hold are often thrown away by us. But our Grandma never threw away those precious soap ends. Our mistake is throwing away small leftover soap scraps because they are too hard to grip and use up. Grandma gathered the small soap scraps into a clean sock. This helped her utilize their full value. Cotton socks work best. She tied the end of the sock tightly. She used it as a loofah while bathing or hung it near the outdoor faucet for washing hands after gardening. This handy method not only reduces waste, it also fully utilizes the value from every bar of soap. That is something most people throw away too soon. Put a brick in the toilet tank. Our Grandma always looked for ways to cut the water bill without needing to call a plumber. The common mistake is using the maximum amount of water in the tank for every flush, leading to unnecessary water waste. Grandma's tip was to put a brick or a sealed plastic bottle full of water in the tank. This displaces volume, reducing the amount of water needed for each flush. She always placed the brick or the heavier, safer plastic bottle towards the corner of the tank. She ensured the object did not obstruct the lid mechanism or the float. Then she checked the flush to ensure proper function. This is a quick, inexpensive way to save about half a gallon, nearly 2 liters, per flush. It significantly reduces monthly water waste, especially in homes with older plumbing fixtures. Save bacon grease. Back when the concept of nothing goes to waste was a philosophy of life, Grandma and Grandpa often kept a tin of bacon grease near the stove, where it was considered a treasure. Pouring away excess fat after frying was unacceptable, as it was a waste of a flavorful butter or oil substitute. The simple tip that helped the poor save more was straining and preserving bacon grease to use as a substitute for butter or cooking oil, adding a classic flavor to everyday meals. After frying breakfast, Grandma always filtered the fat through a piece of cheesecloth to remove charred solids, ensuring the fat was always clean. The lard was stored in an airtight container and kept in the refrigerator for up to a month to prevent rancidity. This fat was then used to season cast iron pans, sauté greens, or serve as the base for cornbread, adding an unmistakable rich flavor. Bacon grease costs nothing extra and is a flavorful substitute for butter or oil. It enhances the rich flavor of eggs, beans, cornbread, and pie crusts, elevating humble dishes. It was a family rule about thrift, an expression of quiet resourcefulness, turning leftover fat into a basic cooking ingredient. Preserve eggs in salt or wood ash. In the era before widespread refrigeration, the big question was how farm families could have fresh eggs year-round, especially when chickens didn't lay much in winter. Relying on store-bought eggs during rationing or shortages was impractical, and Grandma's secret was preserving fresh eggs by burying them in salt or sifted wood ash. The most important thing was to use fresh, unwashed eggs, retaining their natural protective outer layer, a thin membrane that prevents the eggs from spoiling. The eggs were gently buried in a container filled with salt or sifted wood ash, ensuring they didn't touch each other and were completely covered. Ash and salt work as a dual preservation system. Salt absorbs moisture, preventing bacterial growth, while ash keeps light and air out. Thanks to this method, eggs could last up to several months, ensuring a stable food source. Having eggs available meant no need to go to the market and no need for rationing stamps. This salt-covered treasure trove gave families food control, a kind of independence that modern consumer society has taken away. Make cheese from sour milk. In Grandma's kitchen, slightly sour milk was an opportunity to perform a kind of kitchen alchemy. The mistake is wasting milk when it starts to sour, thinking it's spoiled and unusable. Grandma revealed the tip that helps the poor save more: transform slightly sour milk into a delicious fresh cheese. The process is very simple. First, Grandma warmed the slightly sour milk on the stove. Then, she stirred in a little vinegar or lemon juice. The acid would immediately curdle the protein in the milk. After the milk curdled, you just need to strain the curds through cheesecloth and press lightly to remove the whey. The resulting product is creamy, slightly sour cottage cheese and surprisingly filling. It creates something nutritious and rich for milk that otherwise would have spoiled. This method demonstrates quiet independence. If you know how to make your own cheese, you can skip the dairy aisle entirely at the supermarket, which is exactly the kind of power that supermarkets aren't interested in reminding you about. This tip reminds us of the importance of resourcefulness, straight from a family cook. Cut open every tube of cream or condiment. Grandma had a strict rule: never throw away an empty tube without checking what was still inside. We often discard toothpaste, lotion, or ketchup tubes when they can't be squeezed anymore, wasting a significant amount of leftover product. This is an unconscious consumer habit. Grandma taught diligence to the very end: cut open every used tube to get out all the remaining contents. When a tube seemed empty, Grandma would cut it near the sealed end with scissors. Then she used a spoon or small spatula to scoop out and store the remainder in a small airtight container or zip-top bag, ensuring hygiene. This tip is especially effective with beauty products or expensive creams, where every milliliter is valuable and saves on purchasing costs. Over time, this simple habit can significantly extend your purchases, helping you space out shopping trips. For Grandma, using up the rest wasn't just about saving money, but also about respecting resources. It's a small, quiet action, but demonstrates extremely wise and thoughtful financial management. If this journey through culinary memories brought back warm and familiar feelings, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep celebrating these timeless recipes and the beautiful stories behind them. Keep a sourdough starter alive for homemade bread. Having to regularly buy commercial bread yeast is a recurring cost burden that the poor always sought to avoid. Grandma always maintained a live starter in the house, treating it like a companion in the kitchen. She believed that keeping a sourdough starter meant you never had to buy bread yeast again. The simple tip that helped the poor save more was keeping a sourdough starter alive for homemade bread instead of buying yeast. This traditional practice not only saves money, but also creates better, more digestible bread thanks to the natural fermentation process. The process starts by mixing equal amounts of flour and water in a clean jar and stirring daily for 5 to 7 days. When the starter bubbled and was active, Grandma fed it with fresh flour and water weekly, storing it in the refrigerator to slow down fermentation. Just 1 tablespoon of a properly maintained sourdough starter can leaven an entire large loaf of bread. Sourdough is also incredibly versatile. It can be used for pancakes, muffins, pizza crusts, and much more, opening up countless home cooking options. This provides independence in making bread at home without relying on commercial yeast. These 25 signs aren't just simple dishes. They are pieces of a challenging era. Poverty back then didn't beat us. On the contrary, it forged a generation that is tough, resourceful, and knows how to find joy in the simplest things in life. If these stories have touched your memory drawer, please hit like and subscribe to join us as we continue these meaningful journeys back in time. Don't forget to share which childhood dish you remember most in the comments below.